Sorry about that. I'm back. So we were talking about Dorothea Dix. She is trying to reform hospitals, or first reform prisons, right? And for the movement to reform prisons, she wants to separate men, women, and children who, at the beginning of the 1800s, were put together, crammed together in cold, damp rooms, often without food. If they couldn't pay for meals, they often starved. And the jailers would be the ones that they would pay for the meals that they would have. Um, Another thing that was crowding the jails at this time were the people called debtors, and those were people that could not pay off the debt that they had accumulated. And so these people would go to jail, and the law said that they had to stay in jail until their debt was paid off. Now, the person that went into jail for debt obviously cannot work to try to lower their debt. So oftentimes those people spent years in prison because they were not able to pay off their debt. So, what happens is Dorothea Dix and others tried to call for a change in this prison system, and as a result, we start to see a lot of the states, or some of the states, build prisons with only one or two inmates per cell. They also cut down on the cruel punishments that were handed out to inmates; those were banned, and also people that were convicted of minor crimes would receive shorter sentences than those that had done more gruesome crimes. And slowly, states start to um, treat debtors not as criminals. So we start to see that happening within the prison system as well. All right. So we move on then to the temperance movement. In the early 1800s, as we read, there was a widespread use of alcohol in the United States. They would be at political rallies, weddings, funerals, and it would be used by men, women, and children alike. You could find liquor, whiskey, in candy stores and barber shops throughout the United States. So there was a little bit of a problem with the consumption of alcohol in the early 1800s. So what happens is this idea of slowing down this consumption comes to the United States in the form of the temperance movement. And this is the campaign against alcohol abuse. And it starts to take shape in the late 1820s. And women were those that led this battle against what they called demon rum, right? And they said that this rum could lead to beatings of wives and children and the breakup of the family. So some temperance groups urged that people would drink less alcohol than they were. Others sought to stop drinking altogether within the United States. Um, they won major victory in 1851 when Maine banned the sale of alcohol, and eight other states passed Maine's law, which it was called. Most states later repealed the laws, but the temperance crusade would gain new strength in the late 1800s. And we'll talk about that more in the early 1900s when or sorry, mid 1920s, 30s, 100 years later, when we talk about prohibition. All right. The next thing that we are going to talk about, the last thing we're going to talk about today, is the improvement of education. In the 1800s, early 1800s, we had very few American children that were attending school. Massachusetts was the only state that required free public education be supported by communities within that state. Um, Teachers were not very well trained and they were not paid very well. And all of the students for the school would be crammed into one room schoolhouses where the teacher would teach kids from first grade all the way up to eighth grade. Um, Now, there was this movement to improve American education, and they argued that a republic, which we are, right, required educated citizens, so people that are smart and are able to decipher right from wrong, through their education, right? So, the growth of public schools. We have the first state to set the tone was New York State, and they are the ones that start to improve public education. In 1814, they passed a law that required local governments to set up tax-supported um, school districts. Now, there was a man in Massachusetts also, and his name was Horace Mann, and he was the head of the Massachusetts Board of Education in 1837. And what he does is he starts to go after legislatures or lawmakers within Massachusetts to provide more money for education within that state. And under his leadership, the state starts to build new schools and extend the school year. And they raise the pay of teachers in Massachusetts because he is leading this reform movement in the northeastern part of the United States. And because of this, they also opened 3 colleges to train teachers in the state of Massachusetts. Now, there were other states that started to follow the lead of Massachusetts and New York. And by 1850, we have schools that are throughout the North that are free tax supported elementary schools within the northern states. Now, the improvement of southern schools at this time was a little bit slower. In both the North and the South, schooling for children would stop at 8th grade. There was very few public high schools at this time in the United States. So, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, um, and we will go over 1 and 2 now, if that's okay. Well, this was the homework from Monday. So, if we're looking down, we have 1A. What is the Second Great Awakening? That is the dynamic religious movement that swept America in the early 1800s. Who was Charles Grandison Finney? This is the leader of the Second Great Awakening. Dorothea Dix is C. She's the social reformer and activist for prisoners and the mentally ill. Horace Mann is the Massachusetts reformer of public education. Thomas got it. What happened? Sorry, George is here. Come say hi. Yeah.
Hello.
There he is, the man, the myth, the legend. Love you, buddy. This is the founder of a school for the deaf in Hartford, Connecticut. Samuel Gridley Howell. He is the um, founder of the first American school for the blind in 1832. And Laura Bridgman is the first first deaf and blind student to receive a formal education. All right. So, what is social reform? We talked about this a little bit. It's organized attempt to improve what is unjust or imperfect in society in the United States. Predestination, we covered. We said, according to this idea of predestination, God decided in advance which people would attain salvation after death. All right. Let's see. Revival. These are the large outdoor meetings that would come to different cities in the United States during the Second Great Awakening, where traveling preachers would come and attract thousands of people to talk about their spiritual awareness. And a debtor, this is a person who cannot pay money that they owed. And oftentimes in the early 1800s, those people were prisoners in the jails throughout the United States. And the Temperance Movement is the campaign against alcohol abuse in the 1820s. And I think we should go over 3 through 6 as well, because that was Tuesday's homework. We'll make sure that we have that as well. Make sure that you're turning this in to me by Monday. I will put something up on my website as a rundown of what should be turned in on Monday. Number three, why did the reforming spirit grow in the 1800s? That's because religious and political factors contributed to the spirit of reform. Religious leaders stressed free will instead of predestination, empowering individuals to take action. Politically, more people could vote and take. Number four, how did Dorothea Dix help improve treatment of the mentally ill? She gathered evidence by visiting every jail, poorhouse, and hospital in Massachusetts. She then presented a report to the Massachusetts legislature to persuade to make changes in the way mentally ill people were treated. Number five, why did many women join the temperance movement? Women experienced firsthand the effects of alcohol in the forms of wife beating, child abuse, and the breakdown of families. So they were um, very encouraged to stop the um, abuses of alcohol through the temperance movement. Number six, describe two education reforms in the mid 1800s. Number one, Massachusetts opened three colleges to train teachers, and by the 1850s, most northern states had set up three tax supported elementary schools in that state. All right, so sorry, not in that state, but throughout the northern states. Okay, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I hope to see everybody soon. Go out and enjoy the beautiful weather that we are having. I know that George and I, and probably Emma and Lucy, are going to go down and chop up some of our honeysuckle that we tore down the other day and have a nice s'more or two at a campfire. That sound good, bud? All right, let's go ahead and do that. Have a great weekend. Happy Friday.